So I hope that, people hear and feel empowered so that they can go and feel empowered, and then they can empower others, right? To have that reach, to have that connection.
Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator. And now your host, Tyler Como.
Hi, alchemists, and welcome back to another episode of Elemental Educator. I'm your host, Tyler, and if you're joining us for the first time, thank you so very much for tuning in, and welcome to a place where we redefine leadership and challenge the status quo. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Elemental Educator on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast from. And check out our website, elementaleducator.com. Get ready to let the alchemy of education ignite your passion for learning. Today, we're joined by Kate Hunter. Kate is an expert in elementary education, MTSS, and professional learning. Kate brings a wealth of knowledge in curriculum design, relationship building, and data organization. Today, we'll explore her insights on grounded mindsets, navigating change, and the art of taking risks. Kate is passionate about positively impacting educators and students. She's excited to share her journey as she embarks on growing her new small business. Kate, welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And I'm hearing it is your first podcast, so I hope it is an amazing experience, makes you want to do more and maybe start your own one day. You never know.
Yeah, that sounds fun. I would love to. I love talking about education. It's obviously something I'm very passionate about. So I think, that helps make the nerves go away a little bit more, since I know we're just going to be talking about what I love.
Yeah. And let's start by getting into exactly what you love. How did you get to where you are now?
So probably like many people who started in education, I was always the kid playing school. I was always the teacher, lined up all my stuffed animals and my baby dolls, and I was teaching them. I was the one who asked the teacher for extra copies and handouts and all that kind of stuff so I could take it home to pretend with all of my friends. And then just as I got older, I realized I really did enjoy that leadership opportunity that came with that too. So whether it was I played basketball and just working with the other teammates on the basketball team and kind of coaching them through different things. I realized obviously my passion is in that and helping others and serving others through leadership. And so I taught for about 10 years. I actually it's kind of a side note, which, we may get to later. I taught my first year and I hated it. And so I quit. But then I quickly realized that, first years everybody should hate them. Because they're tough. And so I got back into it, thankfully. And I have now been in leadership as an assistant principal. This is my 7th year. And so just kind of learning and growing as I go. And, that kind of is where I'm at here. As I was admin and kind of those first couple of years looking for resources and looking for ideas and looking for ways to collaborate with others, I just realized there's not a lot of resources, at least 6 years ago. There's not a ton for elementary school leaders, or probably all levels of leaders. And so I kind of started thinking, as I got more comfortable in what I was doing, why not share this with others? Put things out there, start your own community. At my school, there's only one assistant principal, so it's me. And there's not a lot of opportunities for collaboration, other than obviously with my principal and other assistant principals in the district. But I wanted to kind of build that community as well, because I love my job, but what we do is tough. Anybody who works in education, it is tough. So that's kind of where, I started seeing there was an impact to simple solutions and organization. And my staff at school always kind of calls me a nerd about spreadsheets. And I said, that's fine, but spreadsheets work. So let's do this, and started to share that.
What a great story. And I like that it really started with, you instantly said that teachers are leaders, and there's a misconception around whether or not they are. They absolutely are 100%. They lead their classroom. They lead their little communities. They are leaders, and they need to have leadership skills and leadership traits. And that first year, even within the 5-year burnout, it's because they don't teach you in school all the little logistics behind what you're actually getting into in education.
Oh yeah.
But, having it rooted in your passion to help and to help learn, that's why you came back. And so it's great. It's great to hear how that story unfolds. Now, with that, on my show, the earth represents core values and rooting yourself in beliefs. So Kate, how do you maintain a grounded mindset in your work as an educator? And how do these core values guide your approach to relationship building and curriculum development?
So first of all, I think one big core value that I really took from that year, I guess, off and coming back was you've got to give yourself grace. we're all humans. We all make mistakes. Things are hard and that's okay. But you've got to give yourself that grace. Also, think about just what's best for kids. That's why we are in this. I think too often sometimes we forget, when there's deadlines and there's new curriculum coming out and, everything's kind of coming from the top. But really what it comes down to is these are kids. We're talking, depending on what age group you work with, we're talking, 5 years old, 10 years old. And I'll tell you a huge part of that was becoming a mom myself. I definitely became a better educator when I had children and just seeing what they're experiencing and their mindsets on everything. So I often think about, well, what if my kid was at the school? And my kids do come to my school. And so it's like, well, if my kid's in that class, and my kid's not any more important than any other child. I actually had an assistant principal when I was teaching tell me, I had a student that was, a little bit of a struggle at building that connection and that relationship with her. And she said, remember somebody used to rock her to sleep. I thought, oh, like it was, she got me good because it was right after I had my first son. And I said, you're right. Like, yes, it might be hard to connect with, but she's a child. Like we're talking about a baby, here. And so that's just kind of has definitely been my approach to everything that I feel like I do. Want to have high expectations for students because I think that they can rise to the expectations that we set on them. As adults, we have a lot of influence over that, and kids believe what we tell them, whether that's telling them our words to them, our body language, our actions, how we respond to things, and kids will rise to what we expect of them. I also am try to be a service leader and really supporting the teachers. And so that relationship building is a huge part of that for me because I know, and as most educators know, we're not going to get anything accomplished until they know that we care about them, right? And so we've got to build that relationship first. There's something that actually my sister told me a long time ago. She's a leader in a different kind of avenue, I guess, but it's this idea of having a presence, so in classrooms, having a presence in their classrooms, which builds that relationship, which builds trust, and then you get to have that influence. So as a leader, if I can do that with the staff, then I can build those relationships, then ultimately I can hopefully have that positive influence on so many more kids. When we're in the classroom, we have an amazing influence on the kids that we're with, but as a leader, I can influence all 45 classrooms in my school by building those relationships with them. So, it just really comes down to, like I said, what's going to be best for the kids in the long run? What would I want for my kids? And also at the same time, though, keeping it simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. That's huge for me. That's a lot of what I do. I think in my little small business that I have is we don't have to make this super complex. It's about caring about kids and helping them grow. So do simple better. That's kind of my philosophy.
Now, we could run an entire show just off of that response right there. There's so much that we can continue to unpack. No, that's exactly what we want to get to, Kate. And one of my favorite quotes is high expectations is an act of love. Low expectations is an act of apathy. So setting high expectations and continually setting high expectations is so beneficial. And doing what's best for kids is so important in the profession that we're in.
Absolutely.
And I just had Jody Carrington on here, who's a psychologist in Alberta, and, we'll have Dr. Greg Wells coming later in the year as well. And they send a very powerful message too, which is to do what's best for kids, you also have to do what's best for your staff, right? And so you do need to think of this holistically. You do need to take care of your staff. You do need to take care of the adults around to take care of the kids. And that segues to when you're referring to rocking to sleep, you have to take care of their parents, right?
Absolutely.
You have to connect with their parents. You have to, because like you said, I'm a first-time dad. There are so many things I don't know as a parent either. And it would be so helpful if somebody reached out and said, hey, you should try doing this if you're seeing this, and I can go home and try it and see if it works, right? So that holistic community, that a group approach of you are all there for the kid and recognizing that makes your life a lot easier.
Absolutely. Yeah. We want to partner with the parents and families or whatever that looks like, for the students, because ultimately it's for the kids.
Exactly. So, now, in your experience with MTSS and professional learning, how do you ensure that the foundational aspects of education are grounded in strong values that benefit both educators and students?
So definitely what's best for kids is kind of the start of that, of just making sure that is our perspective on everything. But our goal, I guess with that, and I talk a lot with our staff at the beginning of every single year. I'm very obviously involved in the MTSS process at my school. And we talk a lot about what our goal is. Our goal is to provide students with the supports they need to be successful in whatever way that looks like. And that's not always going to look the same for every kid. I tell my staff that back at the very beginning of my career in leadership, and I don't mean this in a negative way against anyone, but sometimes the conversation was more about, what do we have to do to get this child into special ed? Special ed's great, but that's not our goal when we have a student that is, at the very beginning of their educational journey. Like, we got to figure this out first. We've got to problem solve a little bit. And so we definitely take that problem solving approach and that team approach so that we're working together hard. When you're supporting kids in an MTSS process, and the way we do it at our school, we are pretty much, we meet with each grade level all day long. So our support team. And when you are talking about students that are struggling all day long, it's impossible to not leave with just that like deflated, discouraged feeling. And so we have to do it together though. So that's what we always say. Hey guys, we are a team. Even if a teacher doesn't have someone that is necessarily on a tier that we're talking about that day, they're going to participate in that meeting too, because they might have had a student just like that last year. And it's that whole idea, with John Hattie's research about teacher efficacy. These are all our students. It is not just the kids in your classroom. It is the kids, that we're working with all of them. We want all of our students to have that opportunity to grow. And so, we have that problem solving approach, that team approach. But also what's really going to be important for us is that circle of control. So, for example, I can't control if a child has a medical inability to focus. That often comes up at schools. I know it at least does mine. Oh, well, they can't focus. They're distracted. That's out of my control. That's the way their brain works. I also think it's shifting that perception about that too. You hear a kid has ADHD. That's just the way their brain works. There's nothing wrong. It's just the brain works a little bit differently. And so we can't control that, but we can control, making sure that we have some really engaging lessons, that we hook them in to the lesson, that as a teacher is walking around the classroom, they're providing that teacher proximity and those nonverbal signals, taps on the shoulder just to bring that child back. We can't control what happens to a student before they get to our class, but we can control the way we respond to them. Maybe they come in and they're grumpy, they throw their book bag down. If our response is, oh my gosh, what are you doing? That child doesn't feel welcome at school. That child, it's going to perpetuate that feeling for them. But if we say, hey, seems like something happened this morning. Do you want to talk about it? Do you need a minute? If we can, as the adults, have that, kind of second and that reaction, I think it's going to be a whole lot, better off. We also talk about attendance a lot. It can't always control attendance at the elementary school level. It's a little different, I know, when you're in high school, because the students have more of a choice there. But at the elementary school level, it's not their fault if they're not there most of the time, and so that's part of what you mentioned before about partnering with parents. So, and I'm kind of probably segueing a little different here, but we do like attendance success meetings where we sit down with the parents and we ask them, what's the struggle to getting your child here on time and how can we help with that? But it's that whole foundation of, we're in this together. We want to help. The goal is for them to succeed. They have to be at school to succeed. But if a student walks into my class or to a teacher's classroom and, they hadn't been there for a couple days and the teacher says, like, why were you out again? That kid's not going to want to come to school. But if they say, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you. I'm so glad you're here today. I'll help you get caught up. Let's just go ahead and get unpacked. The class will be excited to see you when you get in there. It's just that whole mindset shift, I think, of we're the adults and how we respond to things is how it's going to create a whole different perception for the kids. So yeah, that's, and I think a big part, so that our overall goal, is for kids to have success, for that problem solving process. Let's sit down, let's figure this out. Let's, all work together to figure this out. And then just I mentioned, those high expectations. So what if a kid has a reading disability? That's the way their brain works. They can still read, they can still grow. Sometimes we have to shift that in our staff members, shift that viewpoint for sure.
That's exactly it. And Kate, you wouldn't have been able to listen to my last 4 episodes because they're not out yet.
Yeah, I know. I was
they're
like,
recorded.
wait a second, I haven't heard
but
this.
Everything that you just spoke to is everything we unpack in them, from Hattie's visible matrix and talking collective teacher efficacy to the idea of the holistic child and putting the kid first. It is so rooted in your value. And you talked about segueing a bit to share what your school does for attendance. That's not a segue, because you talked about a holistic approach to supporting the kid, which was how you rooted it in your core values. So it's great to hear. Mm-hmm. With that, I want to shift away from the school a little bit, because you do have your small business venture going on. And so what core values are you focusing on to ensure it creates a lasting value for educators and positively impacts students?
So kind of a lot of the same things, right? I can't separate who I am as an educator and a leader, but it's intentionality, and just kind of what we do, again, as leaders or as educators. If we're intentional with that, we can have lasting change with that. I also am a really big, I guess, cheerleader or proponent of empowerment. So the saying, empowered people empower people. So if I can empower other educators through this small business and this little community that I've started, then they'll empower others. And then again, it's just that reach. It keeps getting larger and larger. And hopefully that means empowering students and empowering parents as well. So the things that I really have tried to create with this business are, first of all, are things that I use in the school. So they're genuine and they're applicable because I get it. I'm right there. I'm in the school systems, but they're simple. They're not meant to be hard. And I'm a very organized person. And so that simple, efficient, organized resources are what I find to work best because we already all work hard. So I kind of, my little slogan always, which is work smarter, not harder. We can do this if we, one, connect with each other, and two, we have these different resources to do things. It doesn't have to be difficult.
Now, it sounds a little leader in me-ish when
Yeah.
you talk about the idea of empowerment. So what would you suggest if somebody's trying to get to a stage where they just focus on empowerment? What's the first thing they can be doing to create that within their organization?
I mean, relationship building, for sure. It goes back to that. They've got to have that presence, even in their school building. So one of my favorite things is I go around every morning, or about every morning. Sometimes I have meetings or things come up, as we all know, and say good morning to each class. It takes, depends. It takes 15 minutes. Sometimes it can take an hour, sometimes just depending on what else is going on. But I just go in, I say good morning. I tell the kids I'm glad that they're here, but I also connect with the teachers that way too. And so that gives me an opportunity if, they have a quick question or they need me to have a quick chat with the student, I'm out and about in the school building. Of course, I try to be in the building as much as possible anyways, but that morning kind of time, they know most likely I'm going to be coming around. And so they don't have to try to find me in the hustle and bustle of morning arrival because they know I'm going to come around in the morning. And so it's that, hey, real quick, I need to ask you this question. But I guess in building that presence or having that presence and building that relationship helps to build that trust. And so then when I can say to them, hey, what about this idea? Or, you are very capable of this. Have you, kind of thought about putting this out there? They know that they can trust me, that I'm not going to lead them astray, hopefully, and that I'm going to ask them, to put whatever they can and just try something new and know that I'm there, I guess, to cheer them on with that too.
So it's about creating that safe space for them to be a little bit of innovative in their processes.
Absolutely.
And, one thing that I like to do, and it's a hard thing to do, is I love to do a lot. And as a leader in a building, you need to come up with a list of things you don't need to be doing that you're still doing.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
Within that list, what can you be asking others to do and to help out with? You'll be surprised with how many people are excited to jump on and take on that role because they are feeling like a part of your leadership team at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with your own venture and with walking around and all of the things you're doing, you're probably faced with a lot of adversity, a lot of distraction, a lot of challenges. And this is more of the air element where we start to deal with how we overcome those. So, Kate, how have you navigated the challenges of implementing changes within educational systems, maybe especially when it comes to adapting curriculum and professional learning to meet diverse needs?
Yeah, so one thing that was probably a little hard for me to learn as I got into leadership was that change takes time. I'm a problem solver. I want to just get in. I want to fix something right away. But I've had some other great leaders that have talked to me about, it takes time. You can't turn the Titanic, instantaneously. You've got to allow yourself that time and that grace to help to create that, change, whatever it is. And it's not going to be easy, and that's okay. Again, it's okay if things are hard. I've talked a lot about the relationships, and just teachers are going to trust me when they know that I care about them. And a lot of that is that vulnerability. So I'm a big fan of Brene Brown too. And so she talks a lot about vulnerability. And I think it's just being open and sharing my stories and sharing. I've talked to them about, hey, I had a really difficult time with this student once, and this is what my admin had to tell me, and this is what I had to work through. I kind of know what you're going through. I always tell them that I try not to be too far removed from the classroom, right? As leaders, it's always that, oh, they don't remember what it's like to be in the classroom. But I try to say, no, like I do remember, and I try to be in their classrooms to actually like experience that with them. But I think just kind of implementing that change is that grace that we have to give ourselves and that vulnerability to let's include others. This is a collaborative approach, right? So education can't just be from one person and telling everybody else what to do and building them up, and then empowerment. I mean, it all comes together. I say, like, your kids best, like, what they need, like, let's work together with this, and just having that relationship though. I mean, we know everything in education, right, goes back to those relationships first, for sure.
So you talk about change being a process, not an event, and it takes time to go through. Can you share a time when you had to be, we'll say, particularly fluid in your approach to change, whether in curriculum development, data organization, and how you helped others adjust to that change?
Yeah, so I think a big one that I could think about is my first admin job when I first became assistant principal. I took a lot of time, obviously, that first year to learn and just to ask questions about, okay, why everything's done this way? What could we do differently? Or what would that look like? But kind of revamping our MTSS process. I've done it at 2 different schools now, and I had some great success with both. Kind of before the whole, I know the MTSS with the multi-tiered system of supports is, I feel like, a more relative, at least where I am, newer kind of concept within the last few years. And so it was kind of on that, I guess, that shift between just specific RTI. Obviously, I know it's a part of that, but to the whole MTSS process and helping to cultivate that in my school. So within that first year. So again, the first year I learned a lot about that, or how things were done there. And then that summer, I spent a lot of time researching. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what works best and figuring out how can I deliver this to the rest of the educators on our staff, and how is it manageable, right? So it's not meant to be another thing, but maybe we need to do something differently. How can we make it effective? So I had to believe it. I had to believe in the why. I had to explain that so that others would believe in that why. And I had to be, quote unquote, in the trenches with the staff, because it couldn't be something they weren't going to buy into it if I just said, hey, you need to do this differently, this differently, this differently. It was like, hey, I got an idea. Can we look at this? Let's talk about this. Let me pick your brain about this. And just kind of being open myself. I guess I think is that part of that particularly fluid part of being open and adapting and being flexible. And if they come and say, hey, Kate, we've tried this. Can we work through this a little bit more? Can we workshop this, and being open to say, yeah, like, give me your thoughts. Let's talk about this. It's not just me. I'm one person, I have one brain. Let's share your thoughts on this, and, what works best for your class, what works best for the grade level, what works best for our school. Let's figure that out together.
And if you think you can or can't, you're probably right.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's funny.
exactly.
That's one of my son's favorite little quotes, which I love that he loves that as a kid. So
yeah, there's a lot of power in it, in its simplicity as well. And, explaining the why behind the reason for doing things, it's so important, because you get that buy-in. That's how you establish collective efficacy. Everybody understands why they're doing something. Now, segueing a bit from your admin role to your business side of things, that must be full of unexpected challenges too. How are you applying your experience in education to embrace and adapt to the changes and challenges you're encountering as a new entrepreneur?
So a lot of the same. I got to give myself grace. If I expect that from my staff members, I've got to give that to myself too. And it takes time. The change takes time. Influence takes time, and that's obviously not my full-time job. And so, I love what I do, and that is my full-time. And so I've got to know, what, sometimes maybe I don't have the energy to make a post or to do this about it. I'm still so new in that arena. I just have to try to learn and intentionally seek out, okay, what are some opportunities that I can maybe collaborate with others, and what are some ways that I can learn from others, and taking that time and grace, I feel like, are kind of the big, I guess, pieces of that, and just really building those same things for collaboration and that relationship building. There's people already that I've started to communicate with just through social media that have similar ideas as I do, or even a little bit of different ideas, but we can discuss that, and we can share, and we can see different viewpoints so that I can take that back and, hopefully they can take something, from what I've shared back and we can grapple with that. And then we can figure out how to make things better for everyone. So I would definitely say giving grace, knowing that change and influence take time, but also keeping things simple, right? Just do simple better. It doesn't have to be complicated. I will say that even at my school, I do the social media for our school, but it is simple. It is sharing, kids and everything and what we're doing. And that is definitely something I need to learn a lot more about for the business side of, all the reels and I don't even know what all they are, right? All the hooks and all that kind of stuff. I haven't learned that yet, but I try to keep it simple and authentic so that at least that community that's out there, it may be a small community right now, but like what you see is what you get. This is who I am. And when I'm sharing ideas, again, it is stuff that I am using in my school. I've used every single one of those things. In fact, we were sitting in our first MTSS meetings of the school year last week. And I thought, oh my gosh, wait a second, we forgot all about that thing we did last year. And I went to my store, and kind of pulled it up because it was just faster to find it. I was like, y'all remember, we used this last year. Why are we not using this again? And so 100% just being authentic with it.
And regardless of the size of the community, you still have outreach, you're still influencing. And that's the powerful thing. And if it's quality and it's effective, it will grow. One thing I'm learning from people that I'm talking to is it's apparently still Twitter. If you're still on Twitter, although although it has changed its name to X, but if you're, I guess if you're an original, I'm trying to not say anything about being old and on the platform, but it's still Twitter and still referred to as Twitter. Now, with that, the water represents the ability to implement change, and in all of the things we've just talked about with adversity, it's often coincided with the need for a change process.
Sure.
So, Kate, how do you approach the implementation of new initiatives in education, ensuring that changes you bring are effective and positively received by both staff and students?
So first, I'm a learner. I love to learn. So when I think about my leadership skills and stuff I need to take that time to research. And I've mentioned before and just find out whatever I can. So whatever this new change is or this new initiative that's coming down, I want to make sure that I fully understand it before I'm discussing it with the staff, right? So because whether or not it's something that we necessarily love or would want to do ourselves, I got to figure out the why and how it's going to impact the kids first. And I want to make that relevant then for our staff members. Again, knowing my staff members and building those relationships, I think it helps me to better understand how to approach something new or a change throughout our school. And so, the more I can learn about it and hopefully already know a lot about the staff is in trying to connect that. Help make that connection, help them see the value in something, especially if it's something that, say, my principal and I are really wanting to do differently in the school year. How can we build that buy-in? And, we all know it comes back from the why. And I feel like I'm kind of cliche, I'm picking up all these different leaders and stuff in the thing, right? But Simon Sinek talks about the why of why we do things. And ultimately, I believe in my heart that teachers want to do what is right. They want to do what is best for kids. You don't get into education. Obviously, you don't get into education for the money. You get into education because you want to do what's right for kids. And so sometimes we might have to show them that impact and help them to understand that before we can move forward. But involving them in that process, grappling with them, that's going to help to include them in that and help them to see that why more. So we will, sometimes things will happen, whether, the state level or wherever. And we say, okay, let's get with the staff. Let's talk about this with them and let's see what they think. Let's pose some questions, right? Include them in that conversation. And so, I think that's going to make it a whole lot more effective and they're going to receive that better so that then obviously the students can benefit from whatever that is. But, how do they see this impacting their students? How do they see it impacting their instruction? Because again, they know their kids best. They know their classroom the best. They know what they've already got in place. And so hopefully if we can get that feedback from them and involve them in that conversation, whatever that change thing is, we can work through that together, but also being willing to be flexible and be willing to say, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. That's that vulnerability piece again, right? So maybe they'll bring up something and I'm like, I was looking at it from this perspective. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. Let me think some more. Let me do some more research. Let me get back to you on that because that's a great question. And maybe we need to figure a little something else out with it. But change, it can't just be hey, we're doing this because I said so, right? I mean, we know that. Like, you can't do that. It's not going to have that lasting impact. Because it's not going to be positively received, like you mentioned. So if the staff have a negative perspective on it, the way that it's delivered to the kids is not obviously going to be what's best.
Kate, you are speaking my language through and through here. I'm a massive Simon Sinek fan myself.
Yes.
The people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Such a powerful quote.
Absolutely.
And to really unpack that. On top of that, here's a thought for anybody that's listening. So alchemists, we are talking in a realm of education, but the message of being transparent, building trust, understanding the why, doing what's best, this is any organization.
Absolutely.
Wherever you're leading, wherever you're a part of, this is why, and I did an episode with Danny Kofke, who authored the book, The Wealthy Teacher. This is why he shared a stat that says the highest ranked profession for people becoming millionaires is teachers, because they know how to root back to these values and lead with these values and become entrepreneurs and business owners and lead other organizations after, to set themselves up for success because they are doing the right things in leadership. Now, you said that we keep coming back to the same theme of why. We also keep coming back to the same topic of MTSS. Yep. So in your experience, and in your experience with it and curriculum, what strategies do you use to ensure that changes you implement are fluid and adaptable, meeting the needs of all students and educators?
And that's a goal, right, of MTSS, is that we're meeting the needs of all students. It's when I talked before about kind of having to create a little bit of change and revamping our, before we kind of referred more to as our RTI program. That was the big part of it, is we had these umbrella interventions, as we always looked at them, of, a student would be below grade level in reading. Okay. But every student that was below grade level in reading was getting the same intervention. Well, it may not be the same for each student. The struggle may not have been the same. Maybe one student was struggling with their fluency, maybe their decoding, their accuracy, where maybe one student was discovering with struggling with the comprehension piece. So you can't group them together just because they're below grade level in reading or below grade level in math. You can't have those umbrella interventions. So you have to have that alignment. So, of course, figuring out what the student's struggle is first. We do a lot of benchmark assessments at the beginning of the year. I'm sure everyone's kind of in the midst of all of that right now, if they haven't already. And so we do a lot of screening and a lot of kind of, where are kids at? Where are you at right now? What have you learned? What are you applying, into your reading or to your math or whatever it is? And then even further, so if we recognize that, yes, they need a little bit of growth in their reading. They're, below grade level, but why? So then we start to look at those different components of reading, and we have some specific screeners that we'll use. And these are just things that I've found over the years. And so our benchmark assessments certainly, come kind of more from the district, but then there's so much out there about just trying to narrow down that focus. Obviously you can't work on comprehension necessarily if you're thinking about just pure reading comprehension with the student until they can actually read the words, until they can decode those words. You've got to get that phonics down first. And so things build on each other, but we've got to identify the problem first for that particular student. And what works for one student may not work for another student, and that's okay. So no more umbrella interventions. We really try to align the struggle to the intervention, and then, of course, to the progress monitoring probe, so we can see if things are working. We've got to collect that data in some way. The way we do our MTSS process at my school is very flexible. My support teachers that I work with, and I'm so grateful for them because they certainly are just an amazing team and definitely help, kind of brainstorm all these ideas, but their schedules are very flexible. They might be in this classroom for a little bit, then this classroom, and they're bouncing around. They're pulling this one kid, because those kids are all throughout different classes. So, I mean, for a type, probably most teachers, I feel like not all, but, are kind of type A. And we like things organized, at least at my school, that's how they are. It's not always like that. And they've got to be flexible to know that every day their schedule might be a little different. And as kids demonstrate struggles or hopefully progress and growth, then their schedules are going to change a little bit again. And so we really try to have that flexibility. We don't predetermine any groups or anything, like that, but we create them as we're discussing the students. And so that allows us for that alignment. Ultimately, it's what's best for that kid. And then, of course, what does the data say? We rely very heavy on data. And so, again, I'm a self-proclaimed data nerd, I guess. I love a good spreadsheet with a formula and where it'll calculate all the data for me. But, we kind of joke and have different sayings in our meetings. And I'm always say, but what does the data say? But what does the data say? And it kind of goes back to that. It's not, oh, I think that they're struggling with this, or I think this would be good. What does the data say that makes you think that? We've got to get it back to that. Without data, it's just your opinion. So we've got to have the data to kind of back that up. And we are very systematic with collecting that data. I think it's also important to note that the data isn't just like the progress monitoring, as far as looking at the graphs, but it is that observational data that teachers see in the classroom, the behavioral data that they see. If you give a student a whole page of subtraction problems and they flip, so that they always make sure that the larger numbers on top or, in the ones place or whatever, and they flip that, that's a piece of data, because that goes back to, we've got to teach the student, what all of this even means and what the place value, how that all works. That's an important data too. We have those conversations. So, I think like I said, the alignment, the data, having that growth mindset, that is 100% a huge, huge piece of it. And I share that with my teachers constantly just throughout the year, just to keep that in mind. Because again, when you're sitting there all day long, and you're talking about kids who struggle, because that's who we focus on, right? During those meetings, most of the time, are those kids who are having a hard time. It can be really hard, but we have to have that growth mindset of, no, maybe they're not ready for that yet, but we can help them get to that. And then I also, believe in kind of systems. So that systematic approach to things. James Clear, if you've read the book Atomic Habits, it's a really awesome book. I love that, especially as being kind of the organized person that I am. But, he says in there, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So I've worked really hard to create this system, this whole MTSS system, so that there's a clear outline of the process, that teachers are aware of what's going to happen. It's intentional, it's organized, it's data-based, and it's efficient, because we all know there's never any time. So we've got to get through, we've got to talk about these things, and we've got to reflect on that as educators ourselves. And then I know this is like a huge answer. So I told you, I was like, I could talk about MTSS all day, but the last two things I would really say on that is focus on Tier 1 instruction first. We talk a lot about that, and we've changed some things as far as our expectations with Tier 1 instruction because of things that came out through our MTSS process. If you have a whole class struggling in one particular area, that's not a kid issue. That's an instructional issue. That's a Tier 1 issue. And so we've got to fix that. And then we've mentioned before, but the expectations. Students will rise to what you put on them. And so we have to have those high expectations throughout our MTSS process. Even if they are coming to us and they are in 5th grade and they are reading on a quote unquote 1st grade level, they can still learn to read. They can still grow. They can still do that. And it's our job as the adults to help them understand that expectation, that you just haven't got it yet. We got this. Don't worry. Like, we're here to support that. So I think that was a really probably long answer, but I think hits on, again, it's those strategies and core values that make it work. And I've been really fortunate to have worked in a couple schools where I have been able to see the positive change when you kind of follow this system.
And I'll just add to that as well. Alchemists, it's so important to establish it as a data-driven or a data-informed decision-making process,
Absolutely.
Not a data-only decision-making
Absolutely.
process.
Yes,
if
that's
you
a great
rely
way.
solely on your data, and I know I flip between data and data here all the time.
I do too. That was
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. So if you focus solely on what the data says, you are never going to get the practicality and the applicability and the actual application. You're just taking your theory results and you're saying, hey, this says it works, let's try it. And it might not work in your scenario. So it needs to be a data-driven or a data-informed decision, not that data only. Now, Kate, I want to jump to the FIRE element, which embodies the decision-making and risk-taking. Okay. So what has been one of the riskiest decisions you've made in your educational career, particularly related to curriculum or professional learning, and what was the outcome?
So I, the one of the riskiest was probably quitting after the first year without any kind of plan in mind. That was certainly like my 3-year-old, like, oh, I've followed everything step by step and I'm not really sure. But it was, again, a risk, but definitely was something I grew from and was able to learn from. But really, when we talk about curriculum and professional learning, and I think I've already said it, is that full revamp of the MTSS process, because it was different than what had been done in my district and in my school. And I was still pretty new to leadership. And so still, was working with teachers. And to be honest, I started leadership in my very early 30s. And so a lot of teachers are probably looking at me like, who is this, young that's coming in and trying to tell us what to do? And so it was a big kind of risk, I think, to take. And thankfully, I was supported by some great leaders who said, okay, you've got this. I had all these ideas. And it was, like I said, before the whole big movement was kind of really coming out. And I just knew that there had to be a better way, that it wasn't working doing those umbrella interventions. And so it was a risk because I didn't know. I didn't have any data necessarily to support this is going to promote change. This is going to help our students succeed, but I really believed it in my heart. And it kind of made sense to me. But I had to figure out how to make it make sense to everybody else. And it was going to be impacting the entire school. At the time I was at a K-5 school. And so I thought, okay, if this fails, if all these ideas that I have and all this, if this fails, there's a lot of kids who are going to be impacted by that. But I believed in the research. I believed in what our staff was capable of, and kind of just had to move forward with that and have that confidence. So yeah, I think that was probably, I know it doesn't, I don't know if it's a huge, huge risk in it, but anytime you're changing something in a school, right, it's going to be a risk because ultimately it impacts kids. We're talking about people's babies. And so,
absolutely.
It's taking that risk of just, we've got to try something different. What's the definition of insanity? If you always do the same thing, but expect different results. And so it was like, okay, we can't expect anything different unless we change something. And so we had to go back to that beginning and change that.
Absolutely. And from all of my episodes prior, whenever we talk about risk, we always associate it with our core values. And you say, if the risk you're taking is rooted in your core values, kind of alluding to what you just said here, it doesn't feel like a big risk. It just feels like a change. And that's the important part to it. Now, with that, though, risk-taking is often, it's necessary for growth. Absolutely. How do you encourage educators to take these calculated risks in their teaching practices, and how do you support them through the process?
We talk a lot about being brave. And I'd say when I say we, I'm talking about my principal at my school, just at my school's kind of mindset and stuff. But myself is encouraging them just to be brave and building that relationship first with them. Again, kind of back to those relationships, allows me to support them better when I want them to, hopefully take that risk and to try different things. And, I've got some teachers, even just to kind of give you a little background, they come to my office or say, hey, I'm really sorry. Can I ask you a question? And I say, hold up. First of all, you're not going to apologize. Second of all, of course you can. Like, that's my job, And so I'll make them go back and just kind of say, hey, Katie, I've got a quick question for you. Okay, cool. That's why I'm here. Don't apologize for asking those questions. But I think for them, like, it's a risk. They're not, hopefully not because of me. I think it's just they don't want to bother you if you're busy or whatever it is. So that's, I think, just a big part of working with them to believe in themselves and to understand their value and how much they bring to the school is going to be really important first. And that empowerment, right? And so again, if they feel empowered, if I've cultivated that relationship with them where they feel empowered, then they're going to take these risks. They're going to try these things. Again, I feel like probably a broken record. Give them grace. I tell them, give yourself grace. I pull from my past experiences and be vulnerable with them. I was actually just talking to a first-year teacher yesterday. I saw her and I asked, how's the first year going? And she said, it's a little rough. And I said, it is, isn't it? Like, it is really rough. I said, let me tell you about my story. Let me tell you, what it took for me to push past that first year. I said, you have got to give yourself grace. You are not going to be a perfect teacher your first year. You're not going to be a perfect teacher. You're 20, right? You're going to grow and you're going to learn and it's going to get easier. But you've got to give yourself grace. That's so important. And so I think knowing that they can take that risk and that if it fails, they can give themselves grace, and I'm going to give them that grace too. So, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, so that lesson that you want to try, you want to be innovative, you want to do this, you want to take this risk with this lesson. And if it fails, okay, you lost 45 minutes, you lost an instructional period, you can get that back. We have them. I know there's never any time, but we have them for 180 days. We can fix that. There's really not much, obviously if we're following ethics and everything, there's not much that we can mess up that we can't fix as long as we take those risks, we give ourselves grace, and we collaborate and work together. I always tell them, tell me first, or tell me if something happens, come to me first and I'll help you fix that. Don't obviously try to, brush it under the rug or anything, but anyways, as far as like in their teaching practices, I always think of, it's that servant leadership. I'm their cheerleader. I tell them, I'm going to be your biggest hype person. You want to try that, but you're not sure? Let's do it. Like, let me help you talk it through with me, practice it with me first. I want to straighten their crown so that they can try those different things, because that's how you learn. That's what we ask of kids, is we want them to take risks. So we want them to be brave in their learning. So the teachers and the staff, we want them to do that too. I also think, having hard conversations, they don't have to be mean conversations. So sitting down with a teacher and maybe I'm, trying to motivate them to try something new because something new needs to happen in their classroom. It doesn't have to be, I don't have to be mean about it, but I can have that hard conversation with them because I've built that relationship with them. And I can say, you know what? I see you. I've got you. Like, let's do this. I'm with you. If you try it and it fails, again, I am still with you. Of course, it's hard, especially when you're, they look at me, I'm their evaluator. I'm going to evaluate them on what they do. But I'm not, if I know this is something that is a risk for them, I'm not going to evaluate that on that. Let you tell me when you're ready, and then I can come and I can give you that feedback. But it's just that whole, again, that growth mindset, those relationships. I mean, all those people, kind of come together, and having high expectations for them and cultivating those high expectations in their own mindset is just what I would want someone to do for me, and so I have to treat them that same way. And I saw a quote somewhere on social media, and I think you might have hit on this at the beginning, holding people to their greatness is one of the most loving actions that we can take. And if I'm really serving the staff in my school, I have to hold them to their greatness. So I can't let them settle for just the same old, same old. I've got to help push them to be brave.
Yep. Bringing it back to high expectations is an act of love. Now, I think I know where this is going, but Kate, what are you hoping people action in their lives tomorrow from your message?
I think being impactful doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simple. You can, have a large impact by doing simple better. Again, that empowerment piece. So I hope that people hear and feel empowered so that they can go and feel empowered, and then they can empower others, right? To have that reach, to have that connection, and hope that the staff or educators out there listening, leaders out there listening, I hope that they can take away that they can rise to those expectations, that they can hold high expectations for themselves and for others. And so then as society, I mean, we're just all going to grow better if we all do our little part, right? If we all hold expectations high for kids and we all hold high expectations for ourselves, then society is going to get better and better. But, that's what we want, right? So hopefully people will feel empowered. Hopefully they'll understand the role of collaboration and teamwork, so that we could just kind of create a better place. That's what we're all here for, right?
And what does your future look like?
So I don't know 100%. I have 2 little kids, so I'm sticking, kind of where I'm at right now, hopefully. But I would love, to be more involved in professional learning and leadership coaching in general. So that's one thing that I'm hoping with the business that I've got is something that could hopefully, take off in the future, is working and talking and collaborating with other leaders, especially new leaders. I definitely have a passion for that, just like I do with new teachers, of helping them to realize their potential. Let me straighten your crown for you. Let me be the person that's here if you fall. I want to, I got you. I want to help support you. I want to push you back up when you fall, because you're going to fall. And we all do. We all make mistakes, or we all fail at things. So I would love kind of expand that part of the business. Right now, it's the resources and sharing that, which I love. But ultimately, my goal would be doing some professional learning with schools or with leaders, and doing some coaching along with that. I think would be a really great kind of goal of mine.
How can people get a hold of you if they want to connect and explore those avenues?
Yeah, awesome. So it's Kate Hunter Design is kind of the name of my little business here. So right now I'm just on Instagram. It sounds like I might need to be moving on to Twitter/X to collaborate a little bit more. But Kate Hunter Design on Instagram. In my bio, I've got a link that'll take you to just a small little website that has some additional information about those opportunities. It's about the leadership coaching, it's about professional development, and it's about creating systems and organizational pieces that schools can use. There's different avenues through that website. Also, just shoot me an email. It's a little bit longer. It's katehunterdigitaldesign@gmail.com. But I love talking about and collaborating with other leaders, other educators, and I'd love to continue those conversations for sure.
Alchemists, make sure you check the description of this episode for all of those contact links. And if you're still listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Tyler, and it has been my absolute pleasure to connect with Kate Hunter on the Elemental Educator podcast. Kate, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Yeah,
Awesome.
Honestly, the pleasure is all mine. I love getting to share this message with the world, and it's such a good message to share. So thanks again for joining.
I appreciate that.
You've been listening to the Elemental Educator. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Elemental Educator.